Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Review Pro's webinar, Take Control of Post-Covid-19 Communication to Drive Trust and Bookings. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Daniel Craig, and I'm a former hotel general manager and the founder of Renown. It's my pleasure to produce and moderate this webinar on behalf of Review Pro. Before we start, a few administrative details. To cut down on background noise and distractions, all attendee lines are on mute and cameras are turned off. You're welcome to ask questions and make comments at any time during the webinar using the Q&A tab on your screen. We'll answer as many as time permits at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. We are recording this webinar, and a link to the recording and a copy of these slides will be sent to all registrants within the next few days. You'll find all our webinars, as well as a wealth of guides and learning materials in the resource hub at reviewpro.com, which is open to all during the pandemic. As hotels reopen, now comes the next big hurdle, filling rooms. In today's webinar, we look at how accommodation operators are finding ways to communicate safety protocols and make people feel more confident about traveling. Our topics include trends in traveler sentiment and behavior, effective COVID-19 communications, new research and tools from TripAdvisor, responding to feedback, understanding guest expectations, and as always, we'll end the webinar with a Q&A with our presenters. To kick things off, here's Danica Smith, product specialist at Review Pro, to give us a quick overview of Review Pro, sponsors of today's webinar. Danica.
Hi Daniel, thanks for having me. Good afternoon everyone. I'm phoning from a sunny Barcelona today. So a quick introduction into Review Pro for those of you that don't know us. We are part of the multinational hospitality organization Shiji, and we're based here in Barcelona, which is our head office. But we currently operate all over the world, and we've been around for a while, since 2009. So I guess in hospitality tech, we're kind of dinosaurs. We work with 60,000 accommodation providers and restaurants around the world. On to the next slide, please, Daniel. I'm really excited for the webinar today, and especially for the speakers that we have. And I just wanted to say thank you for everybody dialing in. Here are some of the clients that we work with, and we're incredibly lucky at Review Pro and really proud of the initiatives that our clients around the world have really put together so quickly in the resilience that our industry has in order to overcome COVID-19. We know it's been an incredibly difficult time for everybody, both professionally and personally. So we really hope that Q4 looks a bit more positive, and we're really excited to share some really good best practices today. So a quick overview about Review Pro and what we do. On to the next slide, please, Daniel. We help empower accommodation providers around the world to take action on guest intelligence, whether that's coming from online reviews, surveys, whether that's in-stay or post-stay, and guest messaging. Our platform provides powerful analytics and tools, including dashboards, filters, views, and workflows to help deliver the right information to the right person. So you can really act on the guest intelligence. And of course, when we Review Pro, without having the reporting elements, we provide predefined and custom reports to help really analyze and understand what's happening with the guest experience. But what's super exciting is recently, we've always worked with an AI layer across our semantic analysis, but now we've augmented this layer to drive the guest intelligence and guest interaction in the form of a chatbot. And in the future, we'll also look to take this to our review response model. So that's a quick overview of what we do. Any questions, or if anyone's interested, we can do that at the end. But back over to you, Daniel. Let's kick things off.
Thanks very much, Danica, and we'll bring Danica back a little bit later in the webinar. Well, here we are, about 7 months into the pandemic, and new COVID-19 cases have risen by more than 35% over the past month alone, to a total of more than 16 million confirmed cases worldwide. Hotspots now include the United States, Brazil, and India, and there have been renewed outbreaks in Australia, Hong Kong, Japan, Spain, and elsewhere. On a more positive note, efforts to tame the virus have been largely successful in many countries, including mainland China, New Zealand, and across Europe. Hotels have begun to reopen, and people are once again booking trips. But while travel restrictions are beginning to ease up in some areas, the vast majority of countries are either completely closed to outside visitors, as shown in red on this map, or are only partially open, as shown in pink. A handful of countries are expected to reopen their borders soon, as shown in light green on the map, and in the darker green, we see the 35 countries which have no travel restrictions in place. So we haven't exactly experienced the quick end to the virus and resumption in travel that we were hoping for. Rather, it looks like it's going to be a long and difficult journey to recovery. Right now, the big push for hotels that are open is to get heads in beds and generate cash flow in order to survive until travel regains momentum. But if people don't feel safe, they won't travel. By now, most hotels have put extensive safety protocols into place. Now the challenge is to communicate these protocols in a way that reassures consumers and compels them to book. And that's our focus today. Let's look at some guidelines or best practices to consider when shaping and sharing your COVID-19 communications, along with a few examples. First, good communication starts with listening. To entice people to travel, you need to understand and address their concerns. Today, questions at top of mind for consumers are, is it safe to travel? Am I permitted to travel? Is your property open? What services are available? How will you protect my safety? Are quarantines, temperature checks, or masks required? And will I be able to cancel or change my reservation if needed? If people can't easily find answers to these questions, they may choose to stay elsewhere, or they may choose not to travel at all. Recently, Skift and Oracle surveyed over 4,000 consumers worldwide about the changes that would make them feel more comfortable about staying in a hotel. The top 5 responses were increased cleaning and disinfecting procedures at 60%, social distancing measures at 39%, contactless payment at 35%, temperature checks at 33%, and keyless room entry at 26%. And a total of 71% of respondents agreed that they would be more likely to stay at a hotel that offered self-service technology that minimized physical contact with staff. To be effective in your communications, you need to stay focused on your objectives, whether you're posting information to your website or social media, sending it by email, or interacting with guests and prospects by telephone, messaging, or in person. Generally, we can identify 3 main COVID-19 communication objectives. 1, reassure travelers that you understand their concerns and are committed to keeping them safe on property. 2, build their trust and give them the confidence to book. And 3, set expectations so they know what to expect when they arrive at your door. With so much uncertainty and confusion about the coronavirus out there, it's also important to be clear and concise in your communications. By now, most hotels have coronavirus information on their website. The question is it as effective as it can be? Here, Radisson Hotel Group does a great job of keeping the information clean and simple on its website with illustrations and brief descriptions of safety protocols. I like how Hard Rock Hotels approach their information as well. It stays on brand with its safe and sound wording and takes the opportunity to reinforce its company values like inclusivity, teamwork, and kindness. Positive messages that we kind of need to hear in such troubling times. Sometimes it's hard to tell if a hotel is open or closed, even though it's one of the first questions people have when they visit a website these days. Here, Hard Rock makes it easy to see which properties are temporarily closed and when they're scheduled to reopen. On some hotel websites, COVID-19 information hasn't been updated in weeks or even months, even though important information has changed. Be sure to review and update this content regularly and timestamp it to show that it's current. Link to official and trusted sources for the most up-to-date information, such as your local government authorities and the World Health Organization, as Radisson Hotel Group does here. Bear in mind that today's travelers may have different needs and expectations compared to before the pandemic. In that Skift Oracle survey, almost half of respondents said that they would be willing to take a local trip within the driving distance within the next 6 to 12 months, whereas 44% indicated a leisure trip or a domestic trip, and only about a quarter planned to take an international or a business trip. When asked about the changes to the booking process that would make them more likely to reserve a room, the top three responses were flexible cancellation and refund policies, discounted room rates, and quick access to customer service. So try to design your promotions to appeal to the demographics and needs of these traveler types. For example, here's an offer I received from Fairmont Hotels, which is designed exclusively for residents of Canada, where I live, and it includes free parking, a room upgrade, 10% off the best rate, and flexible cancellation. How could I not take them up on an offer like this? Informing guests in advance about sanitation protocols is one of the most important actions hotels can take, according to J.D. Power's just released 2020 Hotel Guest Satisfaction Study. The study found that guest satisfaction scores fall 66 points on average when no pre-stay communications are received. To ensure there are no surprises upon arrival, include information about closures to restaurants and other services, and changes to operating hours, and new housekeeping policies such as cleaning on request only. And remember that your imagery should support your messaging. So when you look at the screen, which of these photos do you think send appropriate messages during the pandemic, and which maybe not so much? Well, here's my take. I was actually surprised to receive an email from American Airlines with this image on the top left at a time when we're supposed to be avoiding hugs, I thought, and especially with grandma and grandpa. Try to avoid referring to the pandemic in your promotions, such as coronavirus special, like in the image on the top right, which may be perceived as insensitive. And try to steer clear of images depicting crowds, large groups, and tight spaces. Instead, use imagery that shows open spaces, outdoor spaces, physical distancing, and staff cleaning and wearing masks. Finally, ensure that your employees have access to all the latest information so they can respond accurately and thoroughly to guest questions and comments. On-property signage and in-room collateral will help inform guests what's expected of them. Coach staff on how to handle challenging situations such as COVID-related complaints, a guest refusing to comply with mask policy, or a virus case on property. Our other speakers will discuss guest surveys and online reviews shortly. Right now, I'd like to introduce Becky Foley, TripAdvisor's Senior Director of Trust and Safety, to tell us about TripAdvisor's recent research and its new suite of safety tools. Becky, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Daniel, and hello, everybody. Nice to be here today to talk about some of the work that TripAdvisor has been doing to help differentiate your property from other properties around safety precautions. So first, I just wanted to kick off with a little bit of data. Daniel, if you'll go a couple slides forward. TripAdvisor has been working hard, like many others, to understand what travelers are thinking right now and what's going to help them feel safe and better about getting back out there and traveling during this pandemic and after. So one of the things we did is in May, we released a white paper that contains a ton of data that I'm not going to get into today, but I definitely encourage you to take some time and read it around the different phases that we're going to go through as we start to emerge from this pandemic. All of this information is based off of extensive user traveler research, as well as some traffic patterns on TripAdvisor, the world's largest travel website. So some key points that are a little updated from this paper, if you'll go to the next slide, Daniel, that I would just wanted to highlight for you guys today is that I don't think it'll come as a surprise to you. Most travelers are thinking about domestic trips. So whether that's because they can't actually travel anywhere outside of their country, or if it's because that's what they feel safest doing, this is what consumers are doing right now. So people are traveling, they're just keeping it closer to home. More than 1 in 3 consumers are going to take a domestic trip in July or August. And if you go to the next slide, these domestic trips are actually longer than typical trips. So travelers are taking trips between 3 and 9 days. And travelers who visit TripAdvisor who are doing research on where they're going to stay are actually looking at trips from 6 to 9 days. So these domestic trips are not the long weekend away. People are taking their holidays domestically and getting away. There's definitely some pent-up demand to get out there and travel. And if you'll go to the next slide. And one of the things that we're seeing overwhelmingly in our research is that consumers are prioritizing outdoor experiences. So they want to go to outdoor locations. If they're doing any sort of activities or tours, they're doing outdoor tours like kayaks and hikes, etc. So what we're recommending to properties is definitely, even if you're a property within a city or an urban area, prioritize advertising around things that gets travelers outdoors. So if there's a park nearby that is a highlight near your property, that's something that you really just want to make sure travelers understand. There's an opportunity for them to get outside and kind of be away from the big crowds potentially. That's something travelers are really looking to understand or to do right now. So if you go to the next slide. So like I said, I definitely encourage you to read that white paper that we issued in May. A lot of really great data to understand what travelers want to see from you as they start to get out there a little bit more. And one of the things that became clear to us is that people are looking to TripAdvisor to share safety information. How are properties keeping them safe? So if you go to the next slide, we did, again, a lot of surveys ourselves, and I'll just highlight a few data points because we've shared a lot of data already here today. But 65% of travelers that we surveyed said they won't travel until they see physical changes that make them feel safer. So this is really big. This is a shift. I was talking to one of the major hotel brands recently about our Travel Safe initiative, and they said prior to the pandemic, their priority was, taking these cleaning efforts and putting them behind the scenes, a little bit of the Disney model, make the magic happen behind the scenes. But now they're doing the exact opposite. They've got people in high traffic areas, disinfecting constantly, making sure that they're being really overt about all of the measures that they're taking so the travelers can see they're doing something to keep them safe and healthy. 74% of travelers that we surveyed say they want to see a checklist of safety measures on TripAdvisor. So that kind of goes into some of what Daniel was talking about, is that when travelers are looking to see safety information, they want to see it in a really clear and concise manner. We heard that overwhelmingly, and a checklist is what travelers want to see. So if you'll go to the next slide, enter the Travel Safe Initiative for TripAdvisor, which is a program that we launched earlier in June, really primarily to solve two goals. We want to put travelers' minds at ease around their safety, and we want to help support our partners, businesses who have been going above and beyond during this time to ensure that travelers are safe. So we know that a lot of you are investing a lot of time, resource, money into making sure that travelers are safe. And we want to make sure you have a platform within TripAdvisor to share all of those efforts with people who are evaluating your property. So what we did is we created this new section, a COVID-19 section that is contains information provided by you in both a checklist and a free-form text way. So if you go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit more about what this actually looks like. So what you do is you would go to your management center. You either need to be registered and verified with TripAdvisor, or you need to log in and create an account with TripAdvisor if you don't have one already. Go to the next slide. And once you're logged in, what you'll see is there's a black box that you click on, share safety details. And if you go to the next slide, that'll show you what our COVID-19 response center looks like. This is where you'll be able to select safety measures that you are taking at your property that will appear. I'll show you in a minute what that'll look like on your business listing on TripAdvisor. And then there's also a place to add your custom message. And so this goes to what Daniel was saying, you know, this is where you would include messages that are really on brand for your business, and anything that's above and beyond this checklist. So once you participate in this, once you go ahead and enter either the checklist or the response or both, if you go to the next slide, here's what it's going to look like on your business listing. At the top, there will be a green banner that'll say this property's indicated that they're taking measures to keep you safe. Read more. Once a user clicks on that read more, they're going to pop into our COVID-19 section, where that will include the checklist of things that you've indicated you're doing at your property. It will include the custom response that you've entered. And then it also includes the opportunity for travelers to contact you directly via a phone number or an email that you've provided. And then finally, it offers the ability for travelers to ask the community on TripAdvisor a question or to post a review. If you go to the next page. Also, once you've updated your checklist, once you've indicated what measures you're taking via the checklist, your property will be included in our newly launched COVID-19 filter. So basically, travelers have the ability to only compare properties that have indicated on TripAdvisor that they're taking safety measures. So this is an easy way right here to kind of scroll down. Okay, I'm looking for a hotel in Barcelona. Here are the safety measures that these hotels are taking. Within the review form as well, we are asking travelers specific questions like, did this hotel provide hand sanitizer? Are the employees required to wear masks? So we're getting feedback from you as property owners about what you're doing, but we're also, you know, leaning into what people come to TripAdvisor for, which is advice from other travelers. And if you'll go to the next slide. So this is our list of safety measures. You can go in again to your management center and you'll see this list. One thing I just want to really make sure is clear is that this list is evolving. Just like we hear new things, new guidance from governments about what is important to protect people against COVID, we will be changing this list based on government guidance, feedback from associations, and of course, feedback from travelers on what's important to them. What do they want to see? If you go to the next slide, this is our restaurants checklist as well. You can go forward one more. And that's it. So I did just want to, if I haven't made it clear, really important for you to go in and update these safety measures on TripAdvisor. This is definitely something that travelers are engaging in. We have coverage across all 100 of our top 100 geographies on TripAdvisor. So participating properties in all of those geographies. And it's definitely something that travelers have indicated is important to them when planning their next trip. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Becky. So very insightful and important information there. Couple questions for you, and just a reminder to all the listeners to please send your questions in at any time. If we can, we'll try to answer a couple of them on the fly. And for you, Becky, so I did notice that a lot of properties, a lot of hotels and other properties actually have updated their COVID listings. So they've done this. So it looks like you've done a great job of getting the message out there. And so I guess if you haven't done it, your competitors may very well have, so they've got an edge up on you. I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but it is free, correct?
Yes, it is free. We wouldn't want to hide safety information from travelers behind any sort of paid product or anything. So this is for all properties. You don't need to be a paying partner of TripAdvisor by any means. Anyone can go in, register, verify, and engage in this.
Okay, good to know. And that brings me to another point. The filter that's interesting now, travelers can filter results based on COVID-19 safety policies in place and advertised on TripAdvisor. And another really important filter at this time, of course, is cancellation policy. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed that basically all the major online platforms and third-party sites such as Expedia, Google, Booking allow travelers to filter results by flexible cancellation policy. So if you don't have a flexible cancellation policy, if you haven't indicated that you do on these sites, you may be filtered out. You don't appear in results. And I think TripAdvisor is offering a similar filter. Is that correct?
Yes, we have the free cancellation filter, and we also have a filter that will allow you to filter based on reserve now and pay when you stay. So free cancellation and reserve now, pay when you stay, which travelers are quite interested in at this time, obviously.
Indeed. Yeah, we saw the results of that survey I shared at the beginning, how flexible cancellation is really important to travelers right now. So yes. Great stuff. Thank you, Becky. We have more questions for you, but we'll bring you back at the Q&A at the end of the webinar.
Great.
Right now.
Thank you.
Let's move on. Our next guest speaker is Rhonda Meehan, Group Quality Manager at Stay City Group. Welcome, Rhonda. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Daniel, and thanks to Review Pro also for inviting me back. I'm just delighted to be taking part today, and hello to everyone from Dublin, where I'm based today. I am the quality manager for the Stay City Group. Our company operates two brands of apart hotels. We have Stay City, which has been operating since 2004. We currently have 18 properties in the UK, Ireland, France, and more recently in Venice as well. And the other brand is our premium brand, Wild Apart Hotels, and we have properties there in prime city centre locations. So we have Covent Garden in London and Checkpoint Charlie, Berlin, and Grassmarket in Edinburgh. And although we are self-catering apartments, we do very much operate like a hotel as well. We have 24-hour receptions, we have F&B areas, and we have fitness rooms and so on. So our guest mix is really similar to hotels. We have both leisure and corporate, and we do get stays from one night to many months. In terms of my role, I oversee the guest journey, and so analysing all the feedback that we receive, continually trying to improve and just drive our brand standards. My role would have involved a lot of property visits and assisting with new openings. but obviously that's taken a little bit of a backseat recently. So I have been working on just a roadmap for the future, I suppose, working closely with health and safety and our operations team, getting all the new procedures and policies in place. So that's just kept me very busy over the last number of months.
No doubt you've been busy, as many in the industry have been. Now, what is the status of your properties right now? Are they open, closed, both, a mix of both?
Yeah, we were actually quite fortunate in that most of our properties remained open. Because we obviously have the kitchens and the self-catering and access to washer dryers, we accommodated a lot of key workers and people who needed emergency accommodation. So yeah, we had a lot of properties remaining open. They're all fully open now to guests again. So we're 100% back, albeit just with some reduced services in, you know, our restaurants, cafes, and our fitness rooms remain closed. But yeah, we're back and open for business again.
Okay, great. That's good to hear. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the tools and channels that you're using to communicate safety protocols?
Yeah, well, I suppose like everyone else, we started off amending our website and putting all the information on there. So we'd introduced all the standard protocols, the floor markings, the sneeze screens, PPE for our team, training, all of that sort of, all of those sort of measures. So we had a COVID-19 page on our website where guests could access all that information. But we really wanted to get that message driven home. So we decided that we would put out a video, which you can see there on this slide. We actually had two videos. So we did one where we could send out to guests, and we sent that out to all of our email database. So we talked about things like the new room door seals that we'd started. We have a just sanitized label that goes on to some of the items in the room. We talked about the chemicals and the equipment that we use, but it was all done in a very nice way through the video with music on the background. And our message was stay with confidence, the safest of stays in a new era of travel. So we really wanted to get that message across that, you know, they could stay with us safely and feel confident about it. And the second video that we had was the one that would be playing in reception when guests arrived. And so limited information on that, but just to advise them on the physical distancing and washing their hands and so on, and cashless payments. So we had that playing as well. And then we kind of moved on to our pre-arrival email. We would send out an email 72 hours before guest arrival. So we put all of the measures on there as well. We talked about, as you mentioned earlier, guest expectations. So telling them about the changes to our cleaning policies, telling them what they could expect. So that has worked very well for us. We also rolled out our online check-in. We did have that available for some of the properties prior to the COVID starting, but we've rolled it out now to all of them. And it really just helps to speed up the check-in process, you know, enabling guests really to get to their rooms quicker and keeping them away from the reception area. And I think the next step, which we'd already embarked on as well, was the keyless entry. We currently have that. We've currently fast-tracked it, and we have it in trial now in one of our properties. And we're hoping to roll that out over the next few months. So we really just think that guests will benefit from being able to access the room from their mobile phone. Another project that we had begun as well was our company app. So we are going to give that a little bit more priority now as well, just as another means for guests to have that sort of faceless communication and find out all the information that they need to know about their stay. And one that we've introduced only a few weeks ago was the WhatsApp QR codes. So we have the QR codes displayed up and around the property and in the rooms, and the guests can simply scan the QR code that will take them to a WhatsApp message where they can contact our 24-hour reception. We can also use that for food orders. We'll send the guest a text and they give them a time to collect their food. So again, just making sure that we don't get any bottlenecks at reception and trying to keep the area clear, really. And another one that we're currently working on at the moment is the introduction of some digital appliance manuals. So obviously with us having fully equipped kitchens, we have, you know, washer dryers, dishwashers, combi ovens, and some people don't always understand how to use them, particularly if they're international guests not used to the European appliances. So we are just getting some kind of quick step-by-step digital manuals, and those will be available for guests. Again, just making sure they don't have to come to reception. So there are some of the ways that we have been working.
Okay. Now, question for you. How do you find there's so much information to convey to travelers, and how do you find a balance between providing enough information to build trust and confidence without overwhelming them?
Yeah, that's a good question, really. Initially, we had kept our safety measures quite in a summary format on our pre-arrival email. We decided that it was best not to have too much text on the arrival and just keep a link to our website and to the video. But actually, we were getting a lot of questions really still about what measures we were taking and what was happening. So we decided to add all of the measures to the pre-arrival. I think, you know, it is a few more paragraphs to read, but I think guests don't mind that as long as they know that they're coming to somewhere that's clean and safe and they know what measures that we've taken. And I think also what we're doing as well is looking at registering with some independent bodies. So for instance, Fáilte Ireland has the COVID-19 safety charter in Ireland. So we will be sending our team on training for that, which is free. And also because it's an independent body as well, we can display that accreditation and guests can feel safe and reassured, I think. We've also completed the TripAdvisor safety tool information and all the OTA information as well. So I think we've just got it out there everywhere, really.
Okay, so you're finding that at this point, travelers are looking for more information rather than less information. Be interesting to see how that may change over time. And of course, that brings us to what we'll talk about a little bit now, and I think Danica will cover a little bit later, is sort of going forward, how to ensure that your communications address travelers' main concerns. How do you know what their main concerns are?
Yeah, well, as you can see there from the slide, we operate an in-stay and a post-stay survey at the moment. So what we decided to do is to amend those questions and to add in some questions around our measures. So we asked for feedback on how we thought guests thought we were doing with everything COVID related. We asked them, is there anything else that we need to do? And I think it's just really important that we listen to the guests and adapt where we need to. We are finding the very positive response to date, but obviously we need to keep listening to guests. As you mentioned earlier, it's constantly changing all the time. So for instance, face masks might be mandatory in some countries and public areas now. So we have to keep advising guests of the changes and keep them informed. And I think also just making sure we read all of our external reviews as well, and just keep listening to that feedback, really.
Yeah, so it really goes back to that first guideline, listening to travelers' concerns, understanding what their concerns are, and speaking to them in your communications materials, but also understanding that they are changing over time. So we can't just set it and forget it. We need to constantly be massaging. What are your top tips now for accommodation offers who want to use effective COVID-19 communications to build trust and bookings?
Yeah, well, I think introducing some new initiatives can be quite difficult at the moment for some of the hoteliers. I think most of us are operating with reduced resources and tighter budgets. So some of the more technical options that I've talked about might not be an option for everyone. So I think a top tip for me has to be for a small or a larger property is just not to repeat myself, but if you're not already informing your guests or your prospective guests of the measures that you have taken, then you need to really start now and to get that message out everywhere. So it could be a COVID-19 page on your website, or it could be a video message like we did. I think just it's good for guests to feel informed, really, and that's what will give them the confidence to book with your hotel. And then in terms of building trust, I think that comes down to really how well you operate your measures, your safety measures in your properties. So what we're doing is asking the guests for feedback on the measures that we have in place, and we're listening to all those comments and adapting where we need to. And I think that's what will build trust and drive more bookings for us.
All right. Well, thank you, Rhonda. I know we have questions for you. And please, again, listeners, feel free to send in your questions at any time, and we'll bring Rhonda back at the end of the webinar during the Q&A. Right now, let's bring back Danica Smith of Review Pro to talk about managing guest feedback during the pandemic. Danica.
Thanks, Daniel. And both Rhonda and Becky, you have a lot of love on the chat. So everyone's saying, Heather has said, go Stay City. It's amazing what you have accomplished. So congratulations to you guys. So today, just quickly, I really wanted to just bring it back to basics. It's really interesting, and COVID, we've done previous webinars, and I'm sure you've all looked at different, been on different webinars, and your LinkedIn is full about technology and the movement of, advancing forward. But actually what we're also seeing is bringing things back to the basics and how important online reputation is in the fight against COVID, especially in terms of creating trust. So I wanted to set the scene first of all. So Daniel, onto the new slide, please. Next slide. Let's have a look at what's happening regarding online reviews. Now, part of me feels like it's 2008 and I'm talking about the importance of reviews, but it couldn't be more imperative than it is today to really put emphasis on your reviews and your review management strategy. So this is looking at a collection of properties from around the world, 4,332 properties. And we can see we've used a date range from the 1st of March to the end of June 2020 versus the same period last year. Now, I'm sure this is no surprise to you, but actually this collection of properties have seen a decrease in review volume of 97% year on year. Now, obviously, we saw earlier on from Daniel that so many properties around the world have been closed and unfortunately remained closed. But just because review volume is down, it doesn't mean that the visibility and the search is down. I'm sure Becky from TripAdvisor can agree that actually search volumes across TripAdvisor, Google, Booking.com, Expedia, etc. are up. So it's really important that you understand that people are looking at your reviews. So on to the next slide, please, Daniel. So what we're seeing in Review Pro across our clients and across the data is that COVID-19 is obviously a paramount feature when it comes to reviewing properties and part of the guest experience. Now, what we're really proud of the industry is actually many of these reviews are positive. Many guests are actually complimenting the hotel or the service department for the staff and the professionalism of the staff and making them feel so safe and secure, or having great health and safety and cleanliness protocols in place. Unfortunately, there are always a few negative reviews as well that appear. And if you have low review volume, you really cannot afford to have any negative reviews, because that review might stay visible for up to 4, 6, even 12 weeks if you remain closed. So on to the next slide, please, Daniel. So this brings us back to the importance of management response, and on to the next slide, and how I really would like everybody listening in today to really think about their management responses. Now, I fully understand from my ex-hotelier days how difficult it is to respond to reviews. And I can't imagine how stressful and the pressure that comes with that when responding to a COVID-19 mention. However, it's really important we maximize this opportunity. This is the time to really communicate to our guests and future guests. So have a think about your best practice. What are your current workflows and processes that are in place regarding your management response strategy, and what needs to be changed? Who's going to respond to COVID-19 mentions, and what are the workflows that are going to be attributed to that to make sure every single COVID-19 mention is responded to in the right way by the right person and in the right time? What do the KPIs look like at your business? Many of our clients at ReviewPro have managed to set and achieve KPIs such as to respond to all negative reviews within 48 hours. Well, perhaps if your review volume's down, now is the time to change that KPI to be 24 hours. Think about what reviews and surveys you need to prioritize, and how can that response perhaps steal market share from your competitors? And what about templates? Maybe now is the time where templates can really support your management response strategy. If, for example, your spa or your gym is going to remain closed for the rest of the year, perhaps you can create a sentence structure to help support that management response. And just some housekeeping for those of you that are quiet or closed, make sure you've got your Google and Booking.com API set up so you can respond directly to those reviews. On to the next slide, please, Daniel. So let's have a look very briefly at some good examples and some bad examples. So here on the left, you can see a great review from Booking.com, 9 out of 10, 90%. Great. This is the kind of review we want to receive from our property. And the guest has said how great the property has dealt with the coronavirus, the standard of hygiene and the health and standards were very high, and that they found the staff professional and good. Amazing. Well done. Unfortunately, the management response is completely wasted. What a missed out opportunity. It looks quite generic and, to be honest, templated. And they haven't emphasized and really shouted about all of the good that they're doing. So on to the next slide, please, Daniel. Now, we've already heard from Rhonda as they sit in. We've seen this all over the world with our clients. Such great initiatives have been implemented so quickly, and hotels and apartments and hostels have been working so hard. So make sure you communicate that to your guests, not just on your pre-stay or on your website, but it starts with your management response. So this is how a response would have been worded much more efficiently and effectively. Thanking the guests for leaving such a positive review during these difficult times. I'm really pleased to hear that you felt our standards of hygiene and cleanliness were high. We really have invested into new training and health and safety protocols to ensure the safety of all of our guests. We saw from Becky TripAdvisor's research earlier, this is what guests want to see. I want to know exactly what have you done at your property. So make sure you emphasize that in your management response. And just on to the next slide, please, Daniel. And this is an example of a really positive response. Again, a 5 out of 5 on TripAdvisor. This guest is saying how great the staff were despite the situation. And this response I really, really like, because one, it highlights how serious the hotel takes guest safety and the different measures that they've implemented. But they've also added some real human touch and passion, which is what we are known for in our industry. You can see here the hotel manager has responded that they really miss the hotel and the customers and the jobs of which we are passionate, and they can't wait to have them back. On to the next slide, please, Daniel. So really think about how you can bring some personality into your management response as well. And then this just really emphasizes what Becky and Rhonda were talking about regarding Daniel, regarding communication and what happens if that's missed. Unfortunately, this is a negative mention saying that the guest was disappointed to find that there was limited pillows, towels, and amenities. Now, in the management response, the general manager has done very well and explained that this was due to the COVID-19 procedures in place. However, this should have been made really clear to the guest pre-arrival, whether that's on your website, at the booking stage, or if perhaps with your OTAs, perhaps you don't have access to the pre-stay arrival stage, make sure your reception team are making the guests aware when I check in, hi Danica, there's going to be these changes in your room. On to the next slide, please, Daniel. So just to summarize, one of the things that we spoke a lot about today and in previous webinars is how to understand the new guests. Now, on to the next slide, Daniel, what we can see quickly here is some of our clients have been really creative. And why not? You know, for those of you that have surveys, you know, they're unlimited with Review Pro. So create a survey to really capture those new guest perceptions, you know, and really understand what do the guests want? What are their new drivers, their new expectations? So here we can see one of our clients have actually asked a question saying, what specific measures would you like to adopt at the property to ensure that you have trust and confidence in your stay? This is really valuable information that then you can use to then make a business decision based on guest intelligence of what to prioritize. Is it social distancing? Is it room technology, etc.? So to summarize, finally onto the next slide, please, Daniel. Here are just some top tips about how guest intelligence can be used to understand the new guest and then also adapt your communication accordingly. It's really important that you gain insights into these preferences across all stages of the journey. Then you need to make sure that you're prioritizing whether it's operational, service, or marketing communication to ensure guest satisfaction, and you need to be flexible with that. It's really important now more than ever, we look to technology to see how can we create new touch points throughout the guest journey to make sure that we can really protect our online reputation. We cannot afford to have any negative post-stay online reviews during this difficult time when we're all fighting for low occupancy rates. So that's kind of a very quick overview, but the main takeaway is really think about your management response, guys. And again, any questions, we're here, or you can find us later on. So back over to you, Daniel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danica. I got a question for you. I know you wanted to talk about this, but we had such a limited time and so much to cover today. You've recently, Review Pro recently launched a new product, guest experience automation. How would that tie in with our current scenario?
Well, really good question. It supports the communication. So we've always been understanding guest intelligence at Review Pro, and we're all about the guest experience. And we realized that in order for accommodation providers to keep improving the guest experience, we needed to move into the communication channel. So what we do is we have guest messaging, and it's supported by a chatbot. So what we're seeing is, especially with COVID-19, you know, a lot of accommodation providers are open but have less resources. Unfortunately, staff are still on furlough. And what we don't want to do is have blocked up reservations, or like Rhonda said, reception teams of people asking the same questions, you know, typically what time is breakfast? And now in a COVID-19 world, do you have a breakfast buffet? These are the questions that are really repetitive. So what we've done with our GEA, the guest experience automation tool, is actually that can eliminate and take all of that workload over to the chatbot that can automatically answer those repetitive questions to support the guest experience, to free up the hotel team staff to be able to do what we do best, and that's serve the guest and really take things a step further that way. So it couldn't be a more, it's not the great time to launch, but it's something that accommodation providers are looking to, of how technology can support them during COVID-19.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know the product's been in development for quite some time, but without anticipating the pandemic, but certainly the time it's great timing for the launch of this product. Okay, stand by, Danica. We do have more questions. We're going to go to our Q&A session now. Again, please send your questions in using the Q&A tab on your screen. We'll answer as many as time permits in the time remaining. And don't worry, if you ask a question, we won't put you on camera. So let's start. There were lots of questions for Becky at TripAdvisor. One of the questions was related to, so with the checklist, Becky, do you have to follow all the procedures in order to get your listing, or can you sort of pick and choose what protocols you're following and which ones you're not?
Yeah, that's a good question. The list that we have on TripAdvisor isn't meant to be any sort of like certification or saying you must adhere to all of them. Even if you only check a few items on the list of precautions that you're taking, you will be included in that search filter. So it's really important. We understand that not all properties have the resource to participate in every single precaution. And what's most important to travelers is just that with the precautions that you are doing, that you are able to take, you're being really overt and letting travelers know this is what we're doing. So as long as you participate in a few of them, you will be included in that search filter.
Okay, and so that's really the hotelier managed content, and then of course the other side of that is the reviews and cleanliness. When you write a review of a property, always have had to rate cleanliness. Suddenly that becomes so much more important. And I did notice, and I think you touched on this, I noticed when I was going to write a review recently, I was actually prompted with questions related to COVID-19 procedures. So you're mining the specifics of the COVID-19 experience.
Yeah, we are. And one of the things that Danica was touching on that I think is really important is, when you're responding to reviews. And what I would say from a property owner's perspective is it's really important to set expectations with travelers about what you are going to do and make sure that your staff is poised to execute on that. So even if you're only doing 2 or 3 things, you're requiring staff to wear masks, you've got floor coverings indicating social distancing, and you're providing hand sanitizer. Though if you're doing those 3 things, awesome. Make sure that you are doing them, because travelers are coming to TripAdvisor right now and saying, I researched this property in advance. They said that employees were required to wear masks, but no one was wearing masks. So I think it's really important to communicate what you're planning to do and make sure that your staff is executing on that vision. If you change your approach and the measures that you're taking to protect staff, you can always update that on TripAdvisor. In fact, within this COVID-19 section, there is an updated date that shows travelers when you most recently went in there and updated the information about what your property is doing. It's really important to stay current. I think we all are aware that things with COVID change daily, and travelers recognize that, and they want to make sure that you as a property are adapting to those changes. So one of the things they've indicated to us is really important to continue to update that information.
Okay. That's interesting. So much of this is new and we're figuring things out as we go along, but beneath that is really adhering to some of the basics and some of the best practices. And when it comes to online reputation management, which Danica touched on, it's really about promising what you will deliver and then delivering what you will promise. On that note, Rhonda, Stay City has done a great job with your communications on several different fronts. And I've noticed that Stay City, as well as some other brands, have produced videos. And I'm sure a lot of marketing people are out there going, video, I don't have any resources. I don't, have money or the people to do this. Yet it's not necessarily that big of a job. Can you tell us a little bit about how you created your videos?
Yeah, it wasn't any great expense to us. We already had the the images. So we used a lot of kind of static images and some of the 3D video that we had to showcase our rooms. And then we just added in the text, the music, and our in-house team did that as well within a few days. So we didn't really need to go out into the properties, get anyone to film it. So it was pretty easy, but it turned out very well. So I think just give it a go and you might be surprised.
Okay. Related to that, Danica, and this probably is going to have to be our last question because we're at time. But so a lot of properties, companies, their marketing people are on furlough. So how do you update this information when there's no marketing person to do that?
Yeah, it's a real challenge, but like Rhonda says, I think if you can start small and do bit by bit, it can mean so much to guests. And also your management response, you know, if that's the only place that you can control, that's a great starting point to start to communicate to guests what you are doing if you don't have the capacity to update your website or pre-stay emails, for example.
Yeah, I think that a lot of general managers and senior property staff are doing a lot of multitasking these days, and that includes marketing. And fortunately, so much is very user-friendly, TripAdvisor Management Center, the Review Pro tool, etc., that you can figure it out and get it up and running. And so I think a big message today is don't let this information lag. Make sure it's up to date, current, because it's going to help you reassure travelers and entice them to book. So unfortunately, that's all the time that we have today. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everybody's questions, but a reminder that we'll send all of you a link to the recorded webinar and slides, and Review Pro will actually be releasing a guide in the coming weeks based on the theme of this webinar, and that'll be available in the resource library on the Review Pro website. A big thanks to our special guest speakers, Becky Foley of TripAdvisor, thank you. Rhonda Meehan of Stay City Group, thank you so much.
And thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
And Danica Smith of Review Pro, thank you.
Thanks, guys. It was really good.
And thanks so much to all the crew at Review Pro for making this free webinar possible. And lastly, thanks to all of you for joining us today. We look forward to welcome you for our next webinar.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
Daniel.
everyone. Good luck with everyone that's opening.